Okay, well, it's 2 o'clock on my clock. Miss Sherry is used to doing a lot of these, so she could probably moderate this herself, but I'm gonna help her today, just because I like her so much. So you all have made it to the last concurrent session of today. I hope you all have been able to learn some new things that will be helpful maybe for your own family or in your community of practices. My name is Kristen McKinnon. I am with the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center, but I'm also going to be your moderator today. So if you have any questions or concerns or technical issues, just message me in the chat. As you've heard many times today, we just ask that you all turn off your webcams and microphones, which I'm sure you're experts at by now, so that is not an issue. If you have questions for the presenter, we're going to have plenty of time at the end to address those. So feel free, so that you don't forget about your question, to just pop it in the chat. I will keep an eye on those and collect them in one location so that we can make sure Sherry can answer those for you. So I'm glad you all chose the session because Sherry Wilson is an expert on this topic of reframing. She's also a fabulous person to work with. Sherry is Senior Director of Training and Engagement at the National Association for the Family, School, and Community Engagement, which some of you may know as NAFSE. So Sherry, at this time, I want to welcome you to share some of your knowledge with us today.
Thank you, Kristen. It is such a treat to work with you anytime, and I'm really looking forward to working with everyone else today, too. So let's go ahead and get started. We are here to talk about the way we talk about family engagement. And honestly, we've been doing it all wrong. So today, I'm going to share with you some of the research that we did with the Frameworks Institute and a few of the recommendations. It is really a rich and deep topic, so there's a lot more information that's out there, and there's a whole Reframing Academy that we built with the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center that you guys can also participate in. That's going to be starting in the spring, and you can probably access that through the professional development page at the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center's website. But let's get started talking about this today. So we've been doing research on family engagement for many years now, and we know that family engagement is a really important strategy to help children achieve all of their goals and be the most successful as they can be. And so if we know that family engagement is so powerful and we know that it's such an important learning strategy, why have we struggled so much to actually get this done? Why doesn't everybody else feel the sense of urgency that we feel when it comes to engaging families in their children's education? One of the reasons is because we haven't done a very good job of communicating about family engagement. That's been our struggle. And so NAFSE, about 5 years ago, entered into a partnership with the Frameworks Institute to do some research around why we struggle to really communicate how important it is for families to be engaged in their children's education and what that engagement should look like. And so I want to start today by just sharing with you a little bit of information about why it even matters the way that we frame our messages. So I'm going to share with you a couple of video clips of Dr. Kendall Taylor talking about framing and why framing even matters. Let's take a listen to the first one.
You have a communications problem. You have a problem of perception. And the problem looks something like this. That you all have been in positions at one time or another where you think you have the most perfect, awesome, slam dunk, whatever sports metaphor you want to use, way of talking about what you do and why it matters. I mean, heck, it works with two of your closest colleagues. What could go wrong when it goes out to normal people, people who don't eat and breathe and sleep your issues all the time? And you find that when this idea that made so much sense to you goes outside of your immediate circle, it does one of two things. So first of all, it lacks resonance. It doesn't have grip. It goes in one ear and out the other. Secondly, probably more unfortunately, because it happens more frequently, I think, that thing which worked and was so brilliant in your own head goes out and it has the exact opposite effect. on the people you're trying to persuade, on the people you're trying to communicate with. And I'm not going to ask you to take my word for anything today, right? I'm going to show you evidence from the research that I do with my team that shows this. And I have a lot of pieces of examples of evidence of this you say, they think, this loss in translation effect. I'm going to show you one today that comes from some work that we've done to translate the science of early childhood development. And so people who are in this field, people who are developmental scientists, really want to talk about adversity and stress and the effects that stress and adversity can have on young kids. And they say things like this, that persistent stress can derail development and have negative long-term effects on health and well-being. And if you're a developmental scientist, you replace negative with deleterious because that's the way you talk. And so for folks who are in this field, this is true. There is an incredibly deep body of science across a number of disciplines which supports this point. Unfortunately, when you take this idea out to normal people, to members of the general public, you get things that look and sound like this.
Life's hard. It's supposed to be hard. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. All the bad cliches you can think of. I mean, there's been people that have come from absolutely nothing to make it in whatever society's eyes deems success.
So just to make it really crystal clear, that which you just heard was not the intended effect when this expert opened his or her mouth to deliver this message.
So that is a great video because it really explains why the way we position our messages or the way we communicate about the things that matter to us are not often perceived the way that we intend them to be perceived. And when that guy said, life is hard, you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, any early childhood provider that I've ever met would have just been horrified to think about children having to pull themselves up from their bootstraps. But the message that they were using, that's how that was interpreted by their audience. So let's take another look at another clip from Dr. Kendall Taylor about framing. And this clip is really going to share with you the research study that really transformed the way I think about framing communication. Because when I first heard about this study that he's going to tell you about, it blew my mind. So let's take a listen, then we'll talk about it.
The choices that you make as communicators matter. Sometimes the little things, the pronouns that you use, the verbs that you choose, sometimes the big things, the values that you use to explain why your issue matters, those things matter. Those things have frequently dramatic impacts on what people are willing to do and how people are willing to act and engage on your issues. And again, I don't want you to take my word for it. I'm going to give you a quick example that shows you that understanding is frame dependent. And this example comes not from the United States, but from the Canadian province of Alberta. And a quick geography lesson, Alberta is one of the tall, skinny ones in the middle of the country. Kind of all you need to know, it's very cold for this example. And so there's a group of experts and advocates in Alberta who are working to change policy and practice around addiction. They're working to take what we know from science and use it to implement better policies and practices around addiction in this province. And they've been having a great deal of difficulty doing this. A lot of their problem comes from the fact that there's zero support to do anything different when it comes to addiction in this province. And so they came to us and they asked us to conduct some work to figure out how to engage members of the public more productively, to move understanding, and specifically to increase support for a set of evidence-based policies. And so as good framing geeks and dweebs, we do what good framing geeks and dweebs do. We ran an experiment. And in this experiment, we tested 3 different values messages. And so you see the values messages along the horizontal axis of this graph right now. And so some people, so this is a large experiment, 6,000 people, which, believe it or not, is not the entire population of Alberta. It's a representative sample, not an exhaustive sample. Each of these 6,000 people is randomly assigned to one of these messages. So some folks got the value of interdependence, which in this case is the sense that we need to do a better job of dealing with addiction in this province because we're all connected. What influences one of us influences all of us. Other folks got this value of ingenuity, which is an innovation value, that we are a province of problem solvers. You kind of swing your arm when you do this one. There's never been a problem that we haven't been able to solve with some good old Albertan grit and roll up your sleeves problem solvingness. That was my Albertan accent. I don't know if you caught that. That's very important. And other folks, last but not least, got this value of empathy, which is the sense that we need to do a better job of dealing with addiction in this province because people who deal with addiction are people too. They could be our mother, brother, father, sister, neighbor, whomever. And as individuals, we need to show these folks compassion. So what you're going to see on this next click is what I think are 3 beautiful blue bars will appear on the screen. And what those blue bars are going to show you is the extent, the degree to which hearing these different values changes people's support for these evidence-based policies. So can anyone do a good drum roll? Please play along. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So you should see 3 blue bars and notice 2 things. So first of all, 2 of these values, interdependence and ingenuity, make people, to a statistically significant degree, more supportive of these evidence-based policies. That is good news when we run these experiments. And when we get results like that, we stand up, we do a little framing dance. Not going to do it right now, don't worry. We sit back down and we look towards the right-hand side of the screen. The value of empathy is actually depressing people's support for these policies. Right? Now, the kicker is that in a subsequent piece of analysis where we looked at all of the field's external-facing materials, guess which value we found to be in place over 90% of the time? Empathy. Thank you. Not a rhetorical question. And so what this field has been doing for a very long time is endorsing a value which actually drives support down for the very policies that they're advocating. So this example does 2 things. It clearly shows you that that understanding is frame dependent and frames matter. It also shows you that these questions, which values to use, how to communicate, are empirical questions. We don't have to guess. We don't have to use our guts. We can use social science.
So this clip in particular really transformed the way I think about how we talk about family engagement. Because if you had asked me, I would have said empathy would be a powerful message that would really drive support for those evidence-based policies that they were looking for. And it's shocking to me that 90% of the materials they have that message, but it actually has the opposite of the effect that they intended. So learning about all of that was one of the reasons why NAFSC decided to partner with them to do the research on how we talk about family engagement. And
a communication
as a result, we were able to uncover some of the cultural models that actually get in the way of people thinking about family engagement in really productive ways. So cultural models are shortcuts that our brains take to really help us make sense of information. They're shared but implicit understanding. So we can have similar cultural models in our minds. We can also have multiple cultural models in our minds and tap into them without even thinking about them because they happen instantaneously. But they're there to help us make sense of information that we receive. Unfortunately, sometimes cultural models can get in the way of the work that we're trying to do or of helping people understand our messages. So in the research that Frameworks did with us, they were able to identify some of the cultural models that really undercut the work that we do with family engagement and some of the ones that actually support it. So looking at this slide, you see there are 3 different boxes. In the green box, those are cultural models that are widely held across the population and can really help people understand what we mean when we talk about why family engagement is important or what family engagement should look like. People generally agree that parents and families should be actively engaged in their children's learning. They also generally agree that engagement should start when children are young. Most people believe that schools should be warm, welcoming, friendly environments. And they believe that when families are engaged, students do have better outcomes. Now, the cultural model in the yellow box is a little bit different. This cultural model, schools or families, is a cultural model that's actually widely held by educators. And the reason this is in the yellow box is because this can help you or it can hurt you. Because sometimes when we think about schools as families, we're not thinking about the families and community providers and partners who are also part of that family, and it becomes more inclusive. But we can use the schools or families messages to help people within the school to broaden their thinking so they do include those other audiences that are out there. And then finally, we have the ones in the red box. The cultural models in the red box are the cultural models that we should avoid at all costs. These are cultural models that get in the way of people thinking productively about family engagement. So the first one is the tangible triad. This is where you think about schools and you think about parents, teachers, and students, and you don't really recognize anybody else that's a part of that equation. Another one is care transference, or caring is everything. So a lot of people get hung up on the fact that, you have to have teachers who care. They have to have love in their hearts. Families who come to school events and participate are families who care about their children. So the ones who don't come to school and participate obviously don't care. All of that is wrong, and caring is actually not necessary to really successfully educate students. The next one is traditional engagement. This one's tricky because for a traditional engagement cultural model, what happens is people believe that schools play a very specific role in terms of academic content, and families play a really specific role in terms of as teaching their children values or morals, and that those two things are always separate. And so they don't really see a role for families to play when it comes to education. And then finally, culture of poverty is one of the most dangerous cultural models. So talking about poverty and the challenges associated with that when it comes to education often tends to lead people down a really dark path where they tend to believe that people who live in poverty are not able to support their children's learning or don't have any interest in supporting their children's learning. And we know that all of that is not true. So these are things that we uncovered in our research, and we also uncovered what happens when people tap into those cultural models. And I'm going to share with you a video of a person on the street interview. And what happened first is they interviewed this guy, and then they shared with him a message based on the research that they had, which is talking about family engagement in terms of a space launch, where just like you need a team of experts when you launch a rocket, you need mathematicians and scientists and engineers, you need a team of experts to launch children to success, families and teachers and administrators and community members. So the first video you're going to see is just this person on the street who was interviewed, and we asked him about family engagement. Then we're going to tell him about the metaphor where family engagement is like a space launch. And we're going to hear how he responds to that so we can see the difference in the messaging. So let's take a listen.
So as far as schools and families working together, what would you say that looks like?
There's only so much one can do. There's so many families that you would have to work with, and that'd be a massive overhaul.
How would you say schools and communities work together?
I don't know how I would have communities and schools directly interact, but maybe there should be something there. I'm not that sure.
So as you can see, this guy just has no idea how it can happen. He thinks it's too much. Schools have one role, families have another role. So now we shared with him the space launch metaphor to try and help him think about family engagement in terms of a space launch, which is a much more productive way. And let's hear his response.
So I'm curious what you took away from that.
Boom. That's it. That's what I've been saying. Everything's connected. We all work together. Everybody wins.
Okay.
As if we all help each other up. We pull each other's bootstraps.
How would you say that affects children's learning?
I would say it'd be a very healthy relationship because, for one, everybody's pooling their resources to fuel our future. Our children are our future. But at the same time, it shows kids that, hey, if we work together, we can get stuff done. It can make this world just a little bit better every day.
Okay, so first of all, that was not at all what he was saying before he heard the metaphor. He was saying something completely different. But once he heard the metaphor, everything shifted for him in his mind, and he was able to make sense of that information. And one of the nice things about using the research-based communication strategies that we have is this guy went beyond just, being able to make sense of family engagement. He also started mapping on other things he knows about space launches and family engagement when he was talking about children are the future, we got to fuel the future. It's just magical when you see the difference that this can make.
So as far as schools, I'm curious what you took.
Let's move on maybe to the next one. Here we go. Okay, so in the research that we did, we uncovered 3 strands that make it possible for meaningful engagement to happen. So there are 3 things that really need to be a part of our messaging whenever we send a message out. I'm going to share with you a little video that describes each of those 3 things.
There are 3 strands that make up the conditions for engagement. The first strand is to orient your communications toward equity. This can be done when you join an inclusive vision of opportunity with the grounded diagnosis of current inequities. Second, explain the role of context. Show how institutional factors, those formal programs and policies, can either prevent or promote engagement. And finally, illustrate the transformative power of engagement. Help people see the scope and depth of benefits of engagement and how it transforms the education system and communities. These 3 strands animate the reframing strategy and run through specific recommendations. By consistently pointing to the conditions necessary for family, school, and community partnerships, we can broaden our understanding of what engagement involves and help people recognize the importance of policy in better supporting it. By demonstrating how standard practices make engagement difficult, if not impossible, for many families, we can orient people towards equity and help people see what kinds of programs and policies are necessary. Clearly showing how equitable engagement can improve outcomes for everyone in a community builds support for robust changes to the educational system. Each of these conditions for engagement makes a difference on its own, but woven together, they become a powerful and comprehensive framing strategy that centers engagement as a critical component of child development and student success.
So the research clearly indicated that when you can talk about equity and you have to orient the people you're communicating to around that equity message, because they have to understand what's currently not equitable and what are the solutions to that. And then when you pair that with explaining how the role of the institutions can either help or hurt the work that you're doing with families, and finally illustrating the transformative power, showing how much family engagement can transform outcomes for students. When you can weave together a message that has all 3 of those conditions for engagement, you are far more likely to get support for programs and practices that we know will make it more likely that families are able to be meaningful partners in their children's education. So in doing the research, there were actually 6 specific recommendations that Frameworks made. The first one of my favorites, is to use the message opportunity for all to communicate why engagement is important for all of us. So anytime you can use that phrase, opportunity for all, when you're talking about why family engagement matters, it's going to be really powerful. The second one is use concrete and clear explanations of equity. So what they discovered in the research is people have no idea what we mean when we're talking about equity. There are a lot of people who are not in our field, and when we talk about equity, they immediately start thinking about the value of their home. That is not at all what we mean. And there are people who don't know what is inequitable in our schools because that hasn't been a problem for them. So when we're talking about equity, we have to be very clear about what we mean, and we have to propose solutions. The next recommendation was interdependence, and what they found was this works particularly well when you're communicating to educators. communicating to educators and talking about how we all need each other and it shouldn't be any one person's responsibility, but working together, we will all be more successful, really works. It is very, very powerful. The fourth recommendation is the space launch metaphor. As I mentioned, when we use a metaphor, it helps people make sense of information, and this metaphor in particular tested exceptionally well. This is helping people think about family engagement in the context of a space launch and how they're similar so that they can make sense of having different people with different roles in a child's education. The fifth one is foregrounding benefits to teachers and students. So particularly when you're talking with educators and administrators, if you lead with the benefits that family engagement has to students or the benefits that family engagement has to educators, they're going to be much more receptive to your message and it's going to make a lot more sense to them. And then the last one is another one that I think is really, really interesting. What they found when they were doing the research was that when you're communicating about the benefit of family engagement to families, families are the best messenger. What they found was families are often trusted messengers because they have similar experiences and come from a similar perspective. So anytime you're sharing a message about how important it is for families to be engaged in their children's education, if you can ask families to share that message on your behalf, you're going to get a lot farther, and it's going to be really powerful. So here's a little video that we put together specifically about the opportunity for all value, just to really clarify what we mean when we talk about this value. Let's take a listen.
Opportunity for all builds on people's deeply held idea that high-quality educational opportunities should be available for all children and in all communities, and positions engagement as an important educational opportunity. It simultaneously shows that opportunities for engagement promote student learning, thereby positioning engagement as a means to ensure more equitable outcomes. Results from the experiment suggest that the value helps people see that making opportunities for engagement available is a policy matter, rather than one of low individual motivation or the deficient cultural values of certain groups. The opportunity for all value brings to the surface an aspirational vision of more equitable access to engagement and also demonstrates its transformative power.
And that transformative power is part of those conditions for engagement that are necessary. So the opportunity for all value actually weaves all three of those conditions for engagement into the message. And I think one of the reasons why it's really important is because you stop thinking about the family member who didn't show up at the meeting and doesn't care about their kids and start thinking about, are these opportunities available for all families, and what are the ways that we are engaging all families in their children's education? And promoting a message of opportunity for all really makes it clear that this is something that every student should have and is entitled to. So I just want to take a second and practice, and I thought we could use the chat box for this. So I'm going to share with you an example of an opportunity for all message, and I want you to come up with your own and put them in the chat box. Here's mine. At NAFSCI, we believe every child deserves the opportunity to succeed. Every day, we're working with families, schools, and communities to ensure that all kids have what they need to pursue their dreams, whatever those dreams may be. So take a second and pop a message into the chat box. I would love to hear a message that you come up with. I might copy some of them and tweet them later. Okay, Marietta, thank you. This is a good one. Parents have valuable information that will help us serve the student. We should welcome them to the conversation. Yes, I would add to that, Marietta, when we do, every child has the opportunity to succeed. that would really get at that opportunity for all message and really strengthen the one you already came up with. Good one. Here's one for Mary Beth. All children need to enter school ready to learn. This takes a commitment from parents, teachers, and communities. I think that's true, Mary Beth. I totally agree with your statement. I think I would just switch it up a little and make it more about the opportunity. Maybe say every child needs the opportunity to succeed, and that starts when they enter school ready to learn. Something like that to really get at the opportunity for all value. But that's a good start. I love it. Anybody else have one to share with us? I'll give you one more minute, see if we come up with anything. Okay, Fran has one. Our commitment to excellence in academics and achievement means creating opportunity for all. We are so excited to work together to help students succeed. Fantastic, Fran. I love that. I would put that on a flyer or a brochure or a newsletter right now. Well done. Excellent. If you guys think of any others, feel free to pop those into the chat box, and then you can save these and use them later in your own work. But we'll go ahead and push on. So I mentioned that the space launch metaphor is really effective. And when they did the testing, this was some of the data that they came up with. They found with the space launch metaphor, there was an overwhelming number of people who were more supportive of the policies that we need to have effective family engagement, and they understood the effect of the policies when they paid attention to the space launch metaphor. Most people were more willing to take political action, and the metaphor actually had more salience, more stickiness. It really resonated with them and lasted over time. So this metaphor is really powerful. It even promoted an understanding of community engagement much, much more than the others. And looking at this chart, you can see that they actually tested a cooking metaphor and an infrastructure metaphor. I believe it was something about building together. And so the challenge we have is that we often come up with our own metaphors. We make them up. I was doing a training on reframing, and somebody from Pennsylvania said that people in their community would respond better to a barn building metaphor, which I'm a city girl, so that did not resonate at all with me. And I don't know if it's true or not that it would be more effective in that community. What I do know is space launch has been tested in really rigorous ways, and it is effective. We don't have to do a lot of research around other metaphors because we have one that we know works. The cooking metaphor is okay. It's got a couple of places where it really did resonate, but the problem with the cooking metaphor was that often when we think about cooking, we imagine there's one cook in the kitchen, and we don't really think about needing a team to do the cooking. So that's why it's really important not to make up your own metaphors, but really try to stick with one that's already been tested that we know works really well. So here's a couple more person on the street interviews where we shared the space launch metaphor. So you're going to hear what they think of family engagement, and then there'll be a slight pause, and then you'll hear what they thought about family engagement after they heard the space launch metaphor. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts about like what that kind of engagement, families and schools, what that should look like?
Wow. No. I wouldn't know tell you where to begin on that one.
But going back to maybe schools, families, and communities, how should they be working together?
I guess there should be a mission control that kind of connects them as the inner working of NERV's central hub to like process all the information and projects.
Yeah, so clearly this guy got it after he heard the metaphor. And Mary Beth, I see your comment. The metaphor is just as a space launch requires a team of experts, scientists, engineers, mathematicians to successfully complete a mission, We also need a team to help students be successful in school. Parents, teachers, and community partners all working together ensure that every child has every opportunity for success. So that's kind of the metaphor in a nutshell. Here's another clip of another guy on the street talking about the family engagement before and after the metaphor.
When you think about children learning, how does that happen?
Definitely through, I guess, organized schooling, and starts with teachers.
Thinking about schools working together with families, what comes to mind when you think about that?
PTA meetings, teacher conferences, parent-teacher conferences, and stuff like that.
And so thinking about that idea that I read, how should they be working together? What should it look like?
So that just like a rocket launch goes together, you can't have a rocket launch without your scientists and your mathematicians and people driving the rocket and all that stuff. And that's the same thing that goes with the schools and the community. Like, without everybody working together, it's not going to work. And if you have the community and the school and parents all working together, knowing where they're going, then it shouldn't fail.
So what I really love about that clip is you can also see that he is tapping into two different cultural models when he's first approached. So first he's talking about the tangible triad. He doesn't see any way that families and teachers are working together. And then he talks about the traditional cultural model where, school is doing its thing and families only go to PTA meetings and things like that. But then when he hears the metaphor, it completely changes the way that he thinks about it. So Keisha, I see your comment that the village speaks louder to you than a space launch, and I totally understand that, but I will say that's just like that empathy message when it comes to substance abuse. That speaks very loudly to me. If you want to talk to me about people who are suffering from substance abuse and some of the policies we need to put in place to really support them, I'm all about the empathy. I feel really, really strongly that we all need to care for each other. But that doesn't work with 90% of the population. So even though that's a message that you and I believe in, if we want to use something that's going to resonate with the public, then we need to use something that's been tested. So I think that's one important thing. Now, I will say there is a limitation to the research that was done. The research was only done with English-speaking audiences. So we have not had the funding to test this with other audiences that speak other languages. So when you're using these models, this is going to work, but we only know that it's going to work with people who are English-speaking people. We have no evidence one way or the other with people who are not English-speaking families. So I do want to make that clear. It is a limitation to our research. We know that, and we are trying to come up with additional funds so we can do further testing in other languages. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So I want to show you one of my favorite examples of how you can bring the space launch to life. This is maybe the best website in the entire world. And here's a short video clip where you can see the space launch and exactly how they used it.
At the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center, we know that Ohio's children succeed when families, schools, and communities work together. Helping our kids succeed is like working at NASA's Mission Control. Just like a space launch needs astronauts, scientists, and mathematicians to work together, we need schools, families, and communities to work together to help student learning take off. Everybody has a part to play if we want to have a successful launch. When these partnerships are formed, everyone benefits. Teachers are happier with their jobs, have increased confidence, and a better understanding of family and student needs. Students have higher test scores, better attendance, and a more positive attitude towards school. Families feel more supported, have increased confidence in their kids' education, and have better conversations with their kids about school. Our work in the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center is focused on equipping families and educators with what they need to form meaningful partnerships that lead to positive outcomes for all students. So, what do we do at the center? We learn from researchers, educators, families, and other national and state leaders about practices that enhance family engagement. We then take what we've learned and lead the way for the application of these practices by providing tools and trainings to Ohio families and schools for building effective family-school partnerships. To see our work and services, visit our Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center website. We filled our website with resources, trainings, news, and guidance, and stories of effective partnerships from around the state to help schools and families do family engagement well. And we keep adding new resources all the time. You can also keep up to date with us through social media. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and our website, and help us launch student success. Get ready for liftoff.
Just amazing. One of the most effective uses of the space launch metaphor that we've ever seen. We love this video at NAVSky. So I thought we could take a moment and maybe do another little practice activity. This is what we call mapping the metaphor. So when you think of planning a launch, what would be the equivalent of that when it comes to education or family engagement? So go ahead and pop into the chat box if you think you have an answer. What would an equivalent to planning a launch be if you were going to talk about family engagement or talk about education? Lori says, creating a platform. Do you mean a virtual learning platform, Lori? Planning a successful school year or a successful transition, maybe from preschool to kindergarten. That's really good, Maria. Excellent. Carmen says increasing attendance. I could see that too. That is a really, like the launch could almost be any kind of project that you want to work on with families. Donna says deciding on a goal. Lori says a communication method with families and schools. Oh, the platform could be the communication method. I get it. Excellent. Okay, when you think about engineers, mathematicians, and scientists, what would the equivalent of that be when it comes to family engagement? Who would you be talking about? Susan says planning parent engagement activities and including related resources. I guess that could be your planning your launch, right, Susan? Okay, Keisha says staff, admin, community, students, parents, teachers, administrators, they're flying in now. Counselors, administrators, community organizations. You guys are really good at that one. Excellent. So with the space launch, you want to start planning early. What is the equivalent for that one in family engagement? Oh, Nicole says create an action team that includes members of the community, administrators, teachers, and parents. I love that. Planning early. What would you guys substitute for that? Start from enrollment. Yes, the moment kids are enrolled in school, launching into young adulthood, productive members of the community, before school starts, early ages, have a continuum of services through school career. Perfect. Those are great. Then what would you say would be the equivalent of mission accomplished? Anybody want to guess? Or evaluation, achievement of your goals, student success, yes, maybe even graduation, end of the school year, high grad rates, kids participating in extracurricular activities, develop measurable goals. Yeah, you could almost use this language around any goal that you developed, and then mission accomplished would be when you reach that goal. What is it that you want to see? All of these things are perfect. You guys are really good at this. So we have some facilitated courses and community practice that are a community of practice that are available to you guys. And this Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center Academy is going to be kicking off again in the spring. We did one last spring. It was wildly successful. We had a great time. we had a really fun crowd who was in there. So that is going to be available through the professional learning courses that are available on the website. Kristen has posted a link to the page. As it gets closer, we'll start to promote it more. I will be the instructor of that course. So I'll get to see all of you again and for a lot longer as we dig really deep into the content of the Academy. So I want to just stop now and see if anybody has any questions that we might be able to answer related to either reframing or NAFSCI or our work or anything at all, really.
Feel free to unmic if you want to ask Sherry a question directly. I'm looking through the chat. I've been trying to keep an eye on questions. I feel like we've addressed a lot of them.
Yeah, feel free to unmute. I'd love to hear from you. Do we have access to these slides? So Kristen, I know I sent you a copy. I assume everyone's going to get a copy of these, right?
Yes, so they are going to be on our main Summit webpage. I'll put the link again in case you need it. But under Sherry's session 15, it should be located there.
Mm-hmm. Teresa asked, can you share examples of good parent engagement for all? So Teresa, I could talk about this all day long. You have asked one of my favorite questions. So I would say this, family engagement should be related to whatever your students' goals are. So if you have academic goals for your students that you're trying to reach, then good family engagement is helping families understand what kids are learning, what they need to know by the end of the year, the progress that they're making and where they're struggling, and then helping families understand what they can do at home to support what's happening in the classroom. So that is specific to like academic goals and things like that. If you have attendance goals or social emotional goals, it might be a little bit different, but it's very similar. Just identify what your goal is, and then what do you want families to do to help you meet that goal? And that should drive all of the family engagement work that you do. You shouldn't be having what we call random acts of family engagement, where you have an event just because you got to have 5 events this year, so you just plan an event. It really should be driven by your data, and whatever the data in your school improvement plan says your needs are, then working with families to meet those needs makes a lot of sense, right? So the video links are not added to the slides. I don't know if they're sharing PDF versions of those.
It is PDF, yes.
Yeah, so the videos came from the Reframing Academy that we do, and I think some of those videos might be on YouTube. Kristen, I will look and see if I can find links for each of those and then send you those links separately if you want to just add those. Here's a question from Fran. What systemic actions have worked effectively to increase family engagement, particularly at the administration level? So I would say, first of all, administrators often have not had a lot of formal training on how to effectively engage families. So the first thing I would look at is there any PD available that they can get so that they can understand what we're talking about? So that's first. And I know that if you're in Ohio, there's great PD available because you have a statewide family engagement center. Secondly, as you're looking at systemic actions, I think part of it is making sure that schools have the resources that they need to do effective family engagement programs and practices. And then when you go through the Reframing Academy, there's a whole module on what the experts think in terms of the programs and practices that experts recommend to have effective family engagement that improves educational outcomes for all students. So you can get a lot of information about those specific policies through the course. Also, if you're not aware of it already, Dr. Karen Mapp out of Harvard University has a massive open online course that goes into a lot of the systemic things that schools and districts can do to support family engagement. That course is free. You can get it through the Harvard website. If you want to pay a small fee, you can even get a certificate from Harvard, which is nice to be able to tell people you went to Harvard. If you have trouble finding that course, my email address is on the next slide, so jot that down and email me, and I can send you a link to it directly. Let's see, what are some examples of data to look for from Scholar? Okay, so one of the things I would say is look at your school improvement plans and look at the goals that you have for your students, because there should be data connected to those goals. Most of them are driven by the student performance on assessments and things like that. So that's a good source of information. Also, if you have like any kind of like school report card or any of the school goals that they're working on should be things that are driving your family engagement efforts. Keisha said, could participation in courses such as this be required for school boards and superintendents? Keisha, in a perfect world, I would say yes. I don't know of anybody that's going to require it though. So at this point, the best we can do is just gently encourage people to take these courses. I think that would be really good. Yeah, thank you. Kristen posted a link to the famengage.org page. Famengage.org is where we have posted the studies that Frameworks completed. So there's 2 different studies. One of them looks at the data they collected, and then the other study looks at the recommendations that they made. They're both really powerful. If you have time and interest, I totally recommend them. Anybody other questions? I'll go ahead and put my contact information up here. That's how I stay so young. I found the Fountain of Youth, you guys. It's in Oakland. Here's my email address, which is the best way to reach me. My phone number is also on there just in case. But I'm happy to talk about family engagement anytime, so please feel free to reach out. If there's anything you want to talk about, whether it's related to reframing or anything else, I am happy to help. And Kristen posted links to the survey, so thank you, Kristen.
I sure did. So I first just want to thank you again, Sherry, and if you all would like to join me in thanking her in the chat for sharing this knowledge with us today. I am sure she is happy to hang out for a few more minutes if there's any lingering questions in the chat. Since this is the end of the summit, we want to remind you to complete that survey. It's important if you want to get contact hours to fill that out, because that is what we will use for that. And again, thank you again for attending today. Hope you enjoyed yourselves and learned a lot. Please stay connected with us and just enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. I will hang out in case anybody wants to chat.
Yeah.